Okay, so we know enough from the previous video that we can get started and build our first database and create our first table and column and even data, okay, using SQL Server 2008 Express Edition. Now, the first thing that we're going to do today is add a new database to a project, and then we're going to define columns for a new table, and then finally we're going to add some data to it. Then we're going to stop for a video or two and really give a lot of serious consideration to all the steps that we took in this video. So pay attention, because we're going to refer back to what we did in the next couple of videos just to kind of solidify some ideas, some concepts from the specific actions that we'll take here in this video. Okay, so I've already taken the liberty of creating a new project. As you can see here, it's called Day 6. And first of all, there are actually several different ways that you can go about creating a new SQL Server 2008 Express Edition database for use within your application. I'm going to choose right now to create it utilizing only the Visual Studio IDE database integration features that you see within Visual C# 2010 Express Edition. So just to be clear, there's an entirely separate application that you can use to work with databases and work with data, and it's called SQL Server Management Studio. You can download it for free. In fact, tomorrow I think we're going to download it and use it. So instead of working with that separate application for now, let's do this. We want to try to do everything we need to do and become as familiar as possible with the tools that are directly inside of Visual C# 2010 Express Edition, because we can do quite a bit. But we'll see that there are some pleasant benefits from using the SQL Server Management Studio. We'll do that tomorrow. Okay, so here we are. I'm going to go to my Solution Explorer, first of all, to add a new item. And I'm going to scroll down and find, there's two entries. There's a local database and a service-based database. And so what I want to do for this video is to select service-based database. This is how we would create a SQL Server 2008 Express Edition database. If we were to choose local database, we would be creating a SQL Server Compact Edition 3.5 version database. We'll do that later tomorrow. For now, service-based. So do this. Select the name, then we're going to rename this to the name of our company. Let's just, I don't know, call it Acme. All right, so I guess our customers will be like Wile E. Coyote, and we'll probably be selling bottle rockets and things of that nature. All right, so here we go. Data source configuration wizard. We're going to cancel this dialog, selecting the cancel button in the lower right hand corner. And now what we want to do is be able to get inside of this database and start doing something with it. So I guess there's a couple of ways we could go about this. I suppose I could double click it, and when I do that, it pops open a Database Explorer off to the left hand side. Now we can also get to that Database Explorer through, I believe, the View Other Windows submenu. Yeah, there it is. Database Explorer, right? All right, so now I'm going to resize this a little bit. All right, so this is what's inside, or the structure inside of a SQL Server 2008 Express Edition database. Notice, first of all, that it has a file extension of MDF, for Microsoft Data File, or Database File, I guess. And what we want to focus on is a folder called Tables. And when I expand that, there's nothing inside of it. We have an empty database. Okay. So what we're going to do first of all is right-click the Tables folder and select Add New Table. All right, and so this brings up a table designer. And so I'm going to just start working inside of here, and then I'll take a moment to explain what I did in just a moment. So let's start off. Customer ID. This will be of type int. We're not going to allow nulls. First name. nvarchar 50. All right, so that gives us the basics. What I did was create a number of columns for a table I've not yet saved, I've not yet given a name to, but we will ultimately name this customers table. It has a column that we're going to come back to in just a moment called the customer ID, then a first name and a last name, address, city, state, zip, email, a credit limit, and customer since. Now notice that first and last name as well as customer ID do not allow nulls. Now we talked about nulls earlier in this video series. A null is an unknown value, and so we're saying we can't have unknown values or empty values for first name and last name. Additionally, we can't have it for credit limit and customer since. Those always have to be filled in order for you to save a row of data. We'll talk about some ways to make sure that happens. But other things like the address, city, state, zip, and the email, those are all optional fields. They can be added or not added, and we'll go ahead and accept the creation of a new row of data or the update of a row that does not include a value for address, city, state, zip, or email. Now notice that I've defined some data types as well. The customer ID will be an integer. We'll use something called an nvarchar50. We'll talk about data types in a video in just a little bit. But very briefly, a nullable varchar means that a couple of things. First of all, it'll be able to accept Unicode characters. It'll also, the var part of it will be able to resize itself based on how much data is actually in it. So it could be potentially a size saving mechanism to save some file space. Okay, more about that later. The small money and small date time, there's also a data type called money and date time, but those values, as we'll learn, can be very large. And for our application, we know we're not going to have somebody with a ginormous credit limit. So we're just going to keep it at small money. And we'll talk about that thought process or philosophy about how to choose data types in another video. And then the customer since field, again, a small date time. Now I could choose just the regular old date time. Here you can see it. But again, I don't need the precision that that particular data type affords me. And with precision comes extra storage space required for every row of data in that table. So we want to limit that. All right, so the next thing I want to do is come back to this customer ID field. We identified that in the previous video as being a special field that would uniquely identify each row of data in that particular table. So in order to accomplish this, I'm going to take two steps. The first of all is that I'm going to make this an auto-numbered column. And to do that, you can see there's a little property window below our main area where we've defined our fields. And by selecting a given field, I can look at some of the properties specific to it. And I'm going to scroll down to this identity specification, and I'm going to double click yes or no until it becomes yes. And then there are two additional properties here, identity increment and identity seed. The increment means we'll just add 1 to the number as opposed to skip every other one or skip 5 or whatever the case might be. And then the identity seed is the number that will start off. So the first record in the database will be 1, the second will be 2, and so on. So there are some options there. All right, so that's the first step. And then the second step is that I'm going to select this column and then go over here to the toolbar and set that as a primary key. And notice what happens. It puts a little key icon in the column that's next to our customer ID. All right, great. So what I'm going to do right now is save all. And when I do this, first of all, I'm going to have to save my project. And then it's going to ask me for a name of the table. And here I'm going to type in customers and select OK. All right, now I'm going to show you one problem that happens whenever we're dealing with tables, and I'm going to have to set this example up a little bit. Here I'm going to come to the Database Explorer and expand, and you can see now we have a customer table. And if you expand that, you'll see all of the fields, or the columns rather, that were defined for the customers table. And I can select one of the columns, and you can come over here to the properties window and see information about it. For example, its data type, the fact that it is an identity column, and its increment and seed values, and its length precision and scale, and those are not things that really pertain to integers per se, but would be more valuable for those values that have decimal points. Okay. So at any rate, we can learn a little bit more, and even if we did not originally create the database, we can always use that as a reference to get back to say, what was that again? All right, so now let's say, for example, we need to edit this customer table. I'm going to right-click and select Open Table Definition, and that brings our application back open here within a designer. And say, you know what, email is no longer an optional. I don't want to allow nulls anymore for that. I'm going to try and hit save, but notice what happens. It says you cannot save changes that would result in one or more tables being recreated. You can override this behavior by changing your configuration options. Open the Tools menu, click Options. In the Options dialog box, expand the Database Tools node and click Table and Database Designers. You can then clear the Prevent Saving Changes that require table recreation checkbox and then retry the save operation. All right, so if you ever try this, you're basically going to have to do that. And we're in a pending state of change. At this point, we don't want to lose what we just did. We're going to go take its advice, go to Tools Options, and then go down to the Database Tools. And it said go to the Table and Database Designers. And then it said to clear out, let's go here, to clear out Prevent Saving Changes that require table recreation. And by deselecting that option, now I can save the change I made to the table and it would work. The other reason why you might not be able to save changes to a table that you created was because you have data in that table, and by making that change it would break the rules of the data. For example, if I have a field that currently allows nulls, and then I add a bunch of data, and then I try to make it do what I just did here, where I'm said, oh, now that it has to have an email address, it won't be able to save that change because you've already got data in the table that violates that rule, that constraint that you're putting on that particular column. Okay, so in that case, you'd probably have to do a little massaging of the data before you could enforce that rule. Unfortunate, but that's just the way it will work. Okay, so just wanted to be aware of that making changes does have some ramifications. That little option by default is there to save you from accidentally making a change that you didn't intend to make. We basically removed the safety net, and so now whenever we're working with our table, we could be destructive with it. We'll have more to say about how to properly maintain tables and data as we go on through this series. Okay, so now I'm going to close this table, and I'm going to instead right-click and select Show Table Data. And this will bring up something that looks a lot like a spreadsheet, right? Where you have the columns across the top of it. We can scroll over to the right, and then I can basically add in new values here. So let's type in a first name. We'll put, well, we'll have fun with this. Wiley Coyote. How do you spell coyote? I'm sure I spelled that wrong. I can't remember at the top of my head. Oh, I feel stupid now. Okay. Well, at any rate, we'll go, we'll skip address, city, state, zip, and we'll go, and we'll give them a credit limit of, you know, $100 to spend. And then he's a customer since, well, let's say 6/1/2010. Okay. And now I just use the down arrow to accept those values. Now, for example, what would happen if I try to clear out this email address? Just hit delete and then go down. It doesn't give me an error. Why not? I cleared it out. Well, that's because an empty string is different than a null value. Okay. But if I were to try to create a second record. Oh, one other thing. Notice how it automatically numbered my customer ID column to 1. Okay, so let's add another one. Let's just call them Bugs Bunny, and we'll skip some of these columns. Now notice as I'm typing here, I get these little warnings that says this cell has been changed. The change has not been committed yet to the database. The original data is null. Okay, so we can just ignore that for the moment. I'm going to skip email this time and go on to credit limit. We'll give him a $150 credit limit, and he'll be a customer since 6/2/2010. And then I'm going to hit the down arrow, and notice that it gives me an error message that no row was updated, because it says, if we kind of parse through all the difficult language here, you can't insert the value null into the column email. It does not allow nulls, insert fails. All right, so it says correct the errors and retry or press escape to cancel the change. All right, so unfortunately when I hit OK, it got rid of that row data, but at least you get the idea right. All right, so at the very bottom here, there's also a little toolbar. And when we have a lot more data, this will come into play. But you can move between the rows of data using these little back and forward buttons, much like you would use on a DVD player, right? To go to the beginning or the end of a song or of a movie or television show. Here we can click this to add a new row. So if we wanted to try our hand again at inserting a row, we would have that. Also, there are some options to change well, let's just do this. And every time we make a change, you can see that there are some things that change in there. We'll just go to bugs at lvs.net, and the credit limit 150 and 6/2/2010. And I'm going to hit the return key on the keyboard this time instead of the arrow, and that should accept it just fine. And so you can see it says 3 rows. The current position is at row 3. The little asterisk means that we're in the middle of a creation or update for a given row of data. And that's pretty much it for this one, I believe. I want to stop right here. So to recap, let's just kind of go over what we did in this video. We created a new service database in our project, which we understand behind the scenes is using SQL Server 2008 Express Edition. And then I created a table with an identity and a primary key. And I saved the table and I added some data to it like we did just right here. And we worked within this, this View All Data window. So later this hour, what I'm going to do is create a second table, and then I'm going to try to relate those two together. So we're going to see all the orders for Bugs Bunny or Wile E. Coyote. And I'm going to try and figure out how to spell Wile E. Coyote's name before the next video too. But first of all, before we get that far, let's take some time and really soak up the concepts that are related to tables and rows and columns and data types and things of that nature before we move on. All right, so with that, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.